Ghost towns, typically defined as deserted towns or villages with very few or no remaining inhabitants. Deserted, desolate, and eerily silent. Our minds may naturally drift to wondering what happened to those who built the structures that stand forever alone within these abandoned municipalities. But there is one town in Connecticut that is taking the whole ghost town thing a bit literally. And you may not have to wonder what happened to its residents when they reveal themselves to you in rather shocking fashion. This is the story of Dudleytown, an abandoned village nestled in the far reaches of northwestern Connecticut, forever doomed to decay away as it rests silently in the shadows of surrounding mountains. The homes of this once thriving community are long gone by now, but that doesn't necessarily mean that no one lives there. The land here holds a unique energy, and littered amongst the vegetation and rocks are countless mysteries, legends, curses, and ghost tales. The history of Dudleytown predates America itself. The area where it's located was first owned by a man named Thomas Griffiths in the early 1740s. It wasn't until Gideon Dudley arrived in 1747 that the village would take on the name that we know it by today. Gideon was joined by his two brothers when colonizing this new land, and with the Dudleys came their family curse, a curse that supposedly continues to haunt the area to this very day. The Dudley curse dates back even further, having its beginnings in the year of 1510 in England. At the time, Edmund Dudley was accused of being involved in a plot to overthrow King Henry VIII. As punishment, he was beheaded, and a curse was placed upon his family name that stated all of Dudley descendants would be surrounded by horror and death. Now, whether you believe in curses or not, there's no denying that the Dudley family did run into a string of bad luck thereafter. Edmund's son, John Dudley, continued in his father's footsteps, with admirations to control the British throne. He had arranged for his son, Guilford, to marry Lady Jane Grey, who was next in line for the crown. After the reigning king had died, Lady Jane did indeed become queen, but it was short-lived. She was stripped of her title only 9 days after her coronation and charged with high treason. This resulted in both her execution and the execution of the two Dudleys. During the same period, Guilford's brother returned from France, bringing back a military plaque that commemorated his achievements. Supposedly, the plaque was carrying a strain of plague that quickly spread to his fellow officers and troops. The sickness wiped out massive numbers of British soldiers and eventually spread throughout the country, killing thousands. Perhaps noticing the misfortune their family had endured, later generations of Dudleys decided to leave England and travel to the New World in hopes of a fresh start. Unfortunately for them, curses can apparently traverse oceans. Even after the settlement of Dudleytown was fully established, it never had many residents compared to the surrounding areas. According to an 1854 map, the peak number of families that lived there only reached about 26. Despite its low population, the residents of Dudleytown experienced an inordinate amount of accidents, death, and losing community members to insanity. One of the first to go insane was a founding Dudley brother named Abel. Whereas his brothers had eventually moved on from Dudleytown, Abel remained there for his entire life. After years of apparent stability and helping found a thriving little community, he snapped seemingly out of nowhere. He somehow lost his entire fortune and became a rambling lunatic in the eyes of his former friends. When he was no longer able to pay his debts, the town seized his property, sold it, and made him a ward of the town. He died in 1799 at the age of 90, notably senile and without control of his mind. In 1792, 7 years before his passing, Abel's good friend and neighbor, Gershon Hollister, was killed while building a barn at the home of William Tanner. Tanner was also said to have gone insane, and according to records, he was listed as slightly demented. Tanner told and warned his fellow villagers of strange creatures that emerged from the woods at night, though no one knows what exactly he saw. The Nathaniel Carter family moved to Dudleytown in 1759 and were also subject to strange happenings. Shortly after their arrival, a mysterious plague swept through the region and took the lives of some of their relatives. Saddened by the loss, the Carter family moved to the Delaware wilderness, where it's believed that the curse also followed them. They had found themselves in the heart of Indian territory, and during an attack, Indians had slaughtered Nathaniel, his wife, and their infant child. Their other 3 children were abducted and taken to Canada, where his 2 daughters were then ransomed. General Herman Swift was one of Dudleytown's more famous residents. He had served under George Washington in the Revolutionary War. In 1804, his wife, Sarah Fay, was struck by lightning while standing on their front porch and was killed instantly. Soon after, the general went insane and he died. Throughout the years, the small village had countless strange occurrences and misfortunes. Fast forward to 1901, and the population of Dudleytown had dwindled away to almost nothing. One of the last residents of the town was a man named John Patrick Brophy, and following the tradition of those who came before him, he experienced his fair share of tragedy. First, his wife had died of consumption or tuberculosis. A short time after his wife's funeral, his 2 children vanished into the forest. They were never seen again. Shortly after that, Brophys' house burned to the ground in an unexplained fire. And to top it all off, John Brophy himself vanished into the forest without explanation, perhaps wandering aimlessly in his immense grief. He was never heard from again. By the early 1900s, the town was completely deserted. The homes of former residents fell into disrepair and ruin as they were slowly reclaimed by the forest surrounding them. But the curse of Dudleytown had one final blow to deliver before it was all done. Dr. William Clark, a man with a reputation as the leading cancer specialist in New York in the early 1900s, had visited the area and fell in love with the forest and tranquil silence. He purchased 1,000 acres of land in the wilds of Connecticut, which included Dudleytown, and he began construction of a vacation home in the area. He and his wife stayed in the home during weekends and summers after its completion. Now, one weekend in particular, Dr. Clark and his wife were enjoying the peaceful getaway when he was called away to address an emergency back in New York. His wife stayed behind as he attended to his business. He returned 36 hours later to find that his wife had gone insane, just as a number of previous Dudleytown residents had. She began babbling about strange creatures that came out of the forest and attacked her. Dr. Clark couldn't piece together what had happened, but the change in his wife's demeanor was harsh and noticeable. Soon after, she committed suicide. No one knows what she may have seen in the woods during his absence. Today, Dudleytown is deserted, and all that remains are cellar holes and stone foundations from a bygone era. That and the spirits of former residents that manifest as tormented souls, according to some. The area is forbidden and anyone who visits can be charged with trespassing. Those who visited before its lockdown or those who dared to risk visiting despite it claim that the area is undoubtedly haunted. What are your thoughts on Dudleytown? Do curses exist, or is this the particular area afflicted with some sort of negative energy? Would you ever brave the forests of this haunted village if they were open to the public? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I make sure to read every one of them, and it's awesome to see you guys' feedback. Thank you so much as always for making it to the end here, and I hope to see you next week.